what we're really called to do as humanity in these times is to really remember who we are and really to walk ourselves home together by the beat of our drums. Because when we look at the crises that we see erupting in the world today, we realize when we think about it and live into it and research it, and so many really intelligent systems thinking people can see that, oh, underneath the crisis, we see there's a relational crisis, there's a spiritual crisis, and that we're systemically playing the rules. The rules of the game are leading us into these results. And the rules of the game that we're playing by are economics. And the game that we've been playing is like a big game of Monopoly. And we go around the board, and every generation, some people are getting more wealth and some people are getting less. And now it's like we're at the 10th round of Monopoly, and the game, it just doesn't work for us anymore. So how can we flip this board and play a new game? And what we're bringing forward today is that this new game is this commons economics. And so I'm so delighted today to introduce to you an amazing lineup of speakers to really explore this topic in depth and with heart, and with joy and with positivity. Because how are we going to make it through together? We're going to make it through with our highest values, our highest vision, and our highest commitment to create a world that really works for everyone. So I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker first. So she is the president and founder of Natural Capitalism Solutions, and co-creator of Natural Capitalism Concept with Paul Hawkins. And she serves as the managing director of Now Partners, and she serves as the steward of COP-X, a global movement empowering people everywhere to implement climate solutions for their own communities in their own ways. She's the author of hundreds of papers and 17 books, and her book, The Way Out: Kickstarting Capitalism to Save Our Economic Ass, won the Atlas Award. And her book, Creating a Lean and Green Business System, won the Shingo Prize. And her most recent and beloved book, A Finer Future, Creating an Economy in Service to Life, won the Nautilus Book Award. She travels around the world, lecturing at the World Economic Forum, the UN, TED, and many others, and working with clients like Unilever, World Business Council for Sustainable Development, Walmart, Royal Dutch Shell, and working for many governments around the world as well. Woo! So Hunter here, one of the creators of the field of regenerative economics. So we're so honored to have you here. You've helped frame the whole discipline. Your drive and personality is as big as your cowboy hat, which I see as a symbol of your strength and grounded care for the natural world. So we're just delighted to host you here today on World Unity Week. Hello.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It is truly an honor to be with you. Where to start? What I'm not going to do is spend a great deal of time telling you about what's not working. I think you all know that. We're not going into doom scrolling. Except to say, we're in a horse race with catastrophe. The good news, we're in the race. But time is very short. This is not a time to sit back and say, oh, somebody else will work it out. No, they won't. We are the heroes we have been waiting for. Commons. The importance of commons. Humans have managed commons throughout human history. And as the Nobel economist Lynn Ostrom said, when we identify that we have a commons, we tend to manage it very intelligently. We create the governance that it takes to manage it. Perhaps our problem now is that we don't recognize that we share commons and that we need to create this management. There are critical assets. If you are interested in economics, which is, you go back to its root, it is the care of our home, the management of our home. You need to realize that the commons that we identify, space, the Arctic, the oceans, have various international regulations, but there are a lot other commons that are arguably even more important. A stable climate, fertility of soil, access to clean water the world around, biodiversity, knowledge. We now have companies that are taking the knowledge of all of us, of the world, and privatizing it. I would argue there ought to be a knowledge commons in which it is understood that human wisdom, human knowing, belongs to all of us equally. And if someone is going to appropriate part of it for themselves, they need to pay the rest of us. We should be the shareholders of this commons. Commons are traditionally local, and indeed, knowledge is best when it is a nested system of knowledge that begins as place-based. It is going to become increasingly important that we protect place-based knowledge. Again, what my friend Randy Hayes calls cheater capitalism, capitalism as currently practiced by the industrial machine, is destroying local knowledge, local culture, local community. My friend John Fullerton, who I would argue is actually the master of regenerative economics and has a new book out that I would highly recommend to all of you called Regenerative Economics, in which he walks through a lot of these issues, has set forth 8 principles of what it means to be regenerative. A lot of people are throwing that word around. Bayer company, the owner of Monsanto, now says that glyphosate is regenerative. Yeah, no, it's not. And that is an appropriation of a word they have no right to be using. But it's worth understanding what the word actually means. And again, I'm not going to go through those 8, except to note that John has as one of his principles honoring place and community. How do we begin to work in community? I was recently at a marvelous event called Regeneration in the tiny little town of Polica, Italy. Far south in Italy, very poor area, has a visionary mayor and a wonderful woman named Sarah Roversi, who runs a group called Future Food Institute, and they are regenerating the place, regenerating the farmland, regenerating the community. So Sarah invited a whole lot of students, design students, artists, to come and spend some time there. They came from the town of Naples. They each brought a little gift. And they went round the town to all of the houses, knocked on the door, and offered a little gift, a little piece of pastry from Naples. After they had been there for a couple of weeks, they worked with the town to create a meal. The entire town came out. They put tables all down the main street. The grandmas cooked, everybody cooked, and the entire town had a meal together. This is a piece of community. And the more that we can do this, the more that we can break bread together, converse together, play together, sing, dance, this is what builds real community in this time in which we are in many ways so torn apart by very deliberate policies, actions designed to separate us. Last week, actually this week, ended the UN's meeting in Bonn, Germany, to try to prepare for the UN's climate meeting coming up this November in Antalya, Turkey. And it failed, as all of these UN meetings fail. So what you have is the contrast of the nations of the world trying to grapple with who's in charge here and how much of the commons can I get my hands on, We have more wars going on now than at any recent time. The antidote, I think, to that is to begin to look at ourselves as a real community, but also to get good at power. Our side, if we are a side, is not any good at power. We have a tendency toward the spiritual, and that's good. It's insufficient. We need the tools, the willingness to gain and wield power. And I say this in the terms of economics. In 1971, the US Chamber of Commerce asked a man who a couple months later went on to be on the Supreme Court, a man named Lewis Powell, to write a memorandum of how business could re-legitimize itself after the 60s. 60s, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Business was feeling kind of beat up on. Powell said the American economic system is under broad attack. Business must learn that political power is necessary, that such power must be assiduously cultivated, and that when necessary, it must be used aggressively and with determination, without embarrassment and reluctance. And he said, the American business community should fund this effort. On the basis of that, 5 entities, foundations, and the Koch brothers put each something like $5 million for each of 5 years into creating and endowing Heritage Foundation, Hudson, Hoover, Heartland, American Enterprise, Cato, Judicial Crisis Network. Why is American governance right now in such a mess? The Heritage Foundation wrote a document called Project 2025, laying out the agenda that is now being implemented rather lockstep. Our side, like, oh, dear, I hope somebody will, oh, I don't like this. Come on, folks. If we don't like this, now is the time to realize that we need to be putting forth our own policies. We need to come together and implement the known solutions. Because, for example, take climate. We can solve the climate crisis. 2 things in big picture. Transition away from the use of fossil energy, which is what's driving the crisis, to renewable energy, now everywhere on Earth cheaper than fossil energy. There is no longer an economic justification for burning oil, gas, coal, fossil gas, etc. And China is doing this. China is building a gigawatt a day of renewable power. A gigawatt is roughly a nuclear power-sized chunk of electricity. A gigawatt a day of renewables. Why? Because they can now sell these renewables to the rest of the world, because they're cheaper than the way the rest of the world gets its energy. Second big picture solution, regenerative agriculture. We know how to pull carbon out of the air, put it into the soil durably through things like organic, biodynamic, regenerative grazing. Wait, aren't cows the problem? Now, about 60 million years ago, the Earth was at 1,000 parts per million concentration of CO2. When humans evolved, it was at 280 parts per million, 1,000 to 280. Where'd the carbon go? It went into the soil because around 30 million years ago, there evolved these little grazing animals, initially pre-horses. And then the vast herds spread across the world. The grasslands of the world's second largest carbon sink, spread. And all of that carbon went into the soil. We can do that again. It's not the cow, it's the how, as Russ Kunzer says. If you manage grazing animals, cows, sheep, goats, or wild herds, the way nature does, dense packed, in nature it's because of predators. We can do it with electric fences, with cowboys opening and closing water holes. 60 to 100 years' time, we can get back to 300 parts per million concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, a safe level, if we manage the world's grasslands regeneratively. And then there are a grillion other things that you can do, a circular economy, ensuring that you use resources efficiently, cutting out all of the industrial sources of greenhouse gases. But you do these two big things, and we can build a finer future. And when we do this, we will have a higher quality of life. The only way that I know of to do this is all of us. As I said, the UN has failed utterly. The nations of the world have failed. Every time they meet, they battle to a standstill. This is COPX, Conferences of People Independently Organized. This is not my idea. This is the idea of a very senior UN official who shall remain nameless because he's still a very senior UN official, and if the UN ever knew what he was doing, they'd fire him. He said, people coming together and implementing their own solutions in their own way is the only thing that can solve this crisis. I was about to quit. I've done a lot of things in my life. None of them are enough. I was going to hang up my spurs. I live on a beautiful ranch in Colorado. I could stay home, ride my horse, watch an eagle fly. And when the ambassador pitched me on this, I said, that would be enough. So I have dedicated my life to bringing COPX into being. I'm not in charge of it. Kara said, I am a steward. I am a co-steward trying to bring this word to the world. So if any of you want to join us, we would love to have you. COPX.global. https://COPX.global. Join us. And Kara, maybe that's enough to kick off a conversation.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I think it's the way that we redefine power from hoping someone up there can save us to bringing out the power in our own hearts to make the world that we want to see happening, this finer future. Yes. Okay. Well, let's introduce our panels now. We're going to dive into even more into some of the younger generation who are creating these commons economics frameworks, technologies. Great. Oh, here they are. So much intelligence in 6 boxes. Okay. Great. So I'll give a quick introduction to each, and I guess you'll wave when I'm saying your name, and then I'll ask a question for us each to answer. Okay, Silvanae Raveane is a systems economist, co-founder of the Open Systems Foundation that I'm part of, and co-steward of Gaia Commons, which I am part of. And she has spent the past 3 years developing commons-based regenerative economics for planetary well-being. She's something of a human API between worlds, working in the intersection of legal design, finance, governance, and digital coordination. And she's been an entrepreneur consulting across Europe and West Africa, connecting people in almost any setting. I can see her when we go to dinners and conferences. She just lights up and connects with everybody instantly and long term. And she's a real gift at that. And she invites people to drop their masks and embrace their own inner clown, even at an investment conference, and even with Kate Rayworth at that conference. So that's Silvanae, our serious clown. Then we have Oliver Clarity, co-founder also of the Open Systems Foundation, where he's an architect of commons infrastructure through the Gaia Commons initiative, helping communities, organizations, and ecosystem thrive together through shared resource pools. His background spans psychology, systems design, regenerative culture, and conscious mapping. And outside of work, he's a digital artist, musician, and freestyle rapper who won't hesitate to get a groove on at any point in time. Go Oliver. And then Daphne Lan, a founding partner of Planeteer, an AI-powered ecosystem platform for collaboration that connects people, wisdom, and capital, and opportunities for planetary action. She works at the intersection of business, technology, creativity, and impact, co-creating regenerative futures, and she's part of the Gaia Commons task force. So there's a theme here. Yes, I agree. when she's not at her forest art hub, House of Wonder, or dancing an ecosystem of ecosystems into being, you'll find her swimming in the ocean or in the dune lakes near her home in the Netherlands. And Bart, I've met recently at the Hollow Wave, is a steward of Semo network, focusing on designing and building a scalable, full-scope economic system for the past 8 years. And even since he was, well, I'll let him say it. So Bart lives a nomadic lifestyle, combining systems building with extreme sports. He does everything full on. And we have Narayan Wong in Canada. He's a steward of We All Canada, systems mapper, network weaver towards collective consciousness, facilitating professional learning spaces, summer camps that we're planning to do in the future, and dance floors as a DJ. So we've got some themes going there too. And Elizabeth Herald, founding director of Water Unity Networks, or ONE. So we're gonna ONE this, is a whole system strategist who deeply remembers water as the source of all life. One of those things that's so obvious, but then it's like, oh yeah, we actually need to be reminded many times. As a media professional with over 33 years of experience, she utilizes storytelling and systems design to support collective reciprocal actions for watershed community revitalization, understanding water as the core foundation of climate stability, food security, community well-being, and resilience. Elise is passionate about facilitating regenerative initiatives such as the OSWA, which is that network of water keepers, and working with trusted allies to advance pathways to community-led solutions, empowering people to care directly for who and what they love. This passion arose in Eliza through an eye-to-eye encounter with a gray whale, which I hope she might talk to us more about today. Okay, great. So I just want to hear a little more from each of you, as we are this up-and-coming generation who are dedicating our life to these commons economics. So I want to hear your story. What lit your spark in this field? Let's start with Silvanae.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Kara, and thanks you for the lovely introduction. I would say that from a very young age, I was not very good at accepting the answer of things are the way they are, or it is how it is. And so, especially when it came to systems, I really always thought about how they are man-made, and especially man-made. And so, in that sense, I always was thinking about how can we actually change this? And at the same time, I was very passionate about or sensitive towards the notions of fairness and equity. And so after having worked in the private and public sector for quite a while and trying to optimize things from within the current dominant system, I came to the conclusion that if we really wanted to change the system and create one that actually optimizes the well-being of everyone, and everything, within the planetary boundaries, we could not do this within the current systems that basically, as Hunter was just also outlining, optimize at the individual, maybe at family, possibly at nation state scale, but certainly not beyond. And so, in other words, I wanted to work on enabling economics that allow for efficient allocation of resources that connect or address the planetary needs and the infrastructure that we need to reconnect what has before been severed, and also really basically enable that information and resources could start to flow again freely, and that resources can be allocated efficiently rather than fenced off in individual property. Away from the collective. And so I landed with the Commons economics, and I yeah, as I was mentioned before, basically for me, the commons does not just include forests and seas, etc., as some of us might be used to, but actually I consider it as, or understand it as a commons of that aligned actors do contribute to in terms of all kinds of resources. So that might be land, that might be financial capital, certainly also includes innovation and knowledge and best practices. And so, yes, with this, that's what sparked my passion for this. And now I work within Gaia Commons. I don't know if, are we supposed to also already mention that part, or do you want to do another round?
Heard it pretty well, but say a little more about Gaia Commons work in this round. Yeah.
Yes, I now work with Gaia Commons ecosystem, and more specifically within the Open Systems Foundation, where we work on the legal, governance, financial, and technical infrastructure that enable basically the Gaia Common ecosystem to operate, and that is needed, in my opinion, for regenerative actors to coordinate more easily at a larger scale. But I'm sure Oliver, if not Daphne, will elaborate more on it. So I'll stop here.
Great, let's pass it along to Oliver.
Here with all of you. Yes, Oliver Clarity here. And my background actually started in these things studying psychology and human condition in university, and getting to grips with really what are some of the incentives which drive human behavior. Why do we act the way that we do, right? And unfortunately, I found out that a lot of human behavior is driven by really highly scarcity-driven dynamics, right? And part of this is certainly innate to the survival mechanics that make up humans, but part of this is systemically enforced, and the structures around us, I learned, have actually created the conditions which make it very hard to escape such a reality. So from that journey, I quickly realized that most of what I was being taught was rubbish, and instead decided to study consciousness, and through the study of consciousness, to understand the different ranges of consciousness that people operate within, and the different incentives and behavioral pulls that may affect different people at different levels of consciousness. So that journey, once I completed my studies, led me to my first projects, which have for most of my career been philanthropically enabled in the broader realm of systems design. Because if you understand the incentives that drive the behaviors of people within the system and the economic systems themselves, then you stand a chance, at least we like to believe, at designing better systems that can reroute human behavior towards better outcomes to be in greater harmony with the planet. So it's all about coming from these systems of separation, which seek to put people against each other, businesses against each other, where it's my property, and if I guard it stronger, then I have a better competitive edge against you, and I can feed my family better than you can feed your family. And that's really the reality that most of the earth is operating on. It's quite tragic, because it doesn't have to be that way. There's actually some very solid economic cases about how collaborative acts and coming into mutualized resource pools and well-managed commons actually create even more abundance for all of the people involved than if they had just taken away the part that they thought they needed to survive. So to address this, I started focalizing my work into understanding what are some of the most successful experiences of this having happened successfully around the world. And one of the major ones, apart from the obvious commons work of Eleanor Ostrom, which Hunter Lovins also referenced, is very important work, seminal to this field, but is also the more modern open source movements that has taken place all around the world, where there's been the restoration of also digital commons, although not perfect and definitely not governed by Eleanor's principles in the fullest, have still paved the way to create masses of value for a lot of humanity. Through that, realized the focus for me needed to be on taking those principles and applying them generally across what we call an open earth, Open Earth being a global ecosystem where collaboration, transparency, inclusivity, shared ideas, building innovation together leads to greater, more prosperous outcomes for the many and not just for the few. From that, founded the Open Systems Foundation, along with colleagues such as Silvanae, others, and many collaborators now around the world participating in this mission. And through this have been focalizing our energy onto creation of the Gaia Commons, which specifically addresses the open systems needed for global stewardship of commons assets applied locally first, always, right? But interconnected between regions to be able to do much more with less.
Yeah, coming from a slightly different angle, but getting to the same spot. Let's hear from Daphne.
Arriving in this world and in this space is actually initially pioneering in technology. So when I was a student, I was a solar energy consultant. So that was already in a time before around the year 2001. From that, I moved into telecommunications, where almost nobody had a telephone in business. And from there, I ventured into the world of technology, making the world's information universally accessible. I spent about 9 years also at Google as head of technology, working as an ecosystem orchestrator. And for me, the pivotal moment came when I took on an experiment. And that experiment was, what happens if you follow your heart in everything you do? And I found a lot of doors would open unexpectedly. So I started also working with wisdom keepers around the world, launching Down to Earth Film. And that is when I saw, hey, we are all connected, even though we might not even have technology, but we have our human intelligence. And what happens if we apply technology to allow people to work together better?
Let's try again.
Building foundational infrastructure to allow that collaboration to happen.
Okay, let's try. We'll come back to you. So that takes us to Bart. Share us about your story.
Yes, hello there. Nice to be speaking here. So, yeah, I ran into this field really young. Actually, I was 9 years old when I organized a sponsor run for people in Africa with like the children of my neighborhood. And like this was my first like action on let's make this world a better place. From here, I very quickly realized that problems lay much deeper than this. I started designing, making plans, and I made like a whole idea on how the world should be changed. So yeah, and I went step by step on like, okay, what about an educational revolution? How can this change the world? Or like a spiritual revolution? Can we build festivals that can like grow, go on for longer, and transform into civilizations and keep growing from there? And like all these ideas that I had were like, on a practical sense, they are super realizable. Like all the resources are there to make them happen, but yet it's extremely difficult to make them happen because yeah. So going more into that, I realized more and more. If you look at all the problems that we have, if you reason back a few steps, it always comes down to money. It's always value exchange and decision making, which all comes down to our economic system. So that became my focus. Started like designing in this, and I went really committed into this. And I also came to this realization: like, if you look at all the projects that are out there, they have these beautiful ideas. There are so many ideas about how the future can look like in a beautiful way. There's also a lot of alignment among humanity on how this could be, but the path towards it is so complicated, the way to bridge it. And it's really important to look into how can we have this old, how can we create something in the old paradigm from which the new paradigm arises. And it's a nice reference back to what Hunter said about this, like the need for power within this movement, because this is really a true thing that I'm really focused on as well, how to create power in the old paradigm in a way that creates this new paradigm commons infrastructure. So I think it's very important that this new paradigm, which is about having a new type of money that makes like the old money irrelevant, but also to create this whole ecosystem with revenue models within the old paradigm. So yeah, that's the project that I'm doing is Semo. It's a whole ecosystem with different revenue models in it that all have a bridge towards a new economic system. Yeah, I think that is my introduction. I think I have a chance to say more about this later.
Yeah, let's just pass it on to Narayan. Well, you're getting claps and hearts. Very good.
Hi, everyone. I didn't start out my life trying to do good. I think as a young adult, I even had the motto, something like become VP or retire trying. And you know what? Like, I actually started to shift. I was in a 50,000 person corporation, and we had about, I think, something like 19 million customers. And I ended up joining this team just trying to increase customer happiness. So I created this customer happiness team, and I discovered, oh my gosh, it feels so good to bring more joy into the world. And keep in mind, I'm doing this within a for-profit system. Like, make these people happier so we can have more money. And it took a while, but I ended up taking this thinking and going, there's something not quite right about this, even though I was finding enjoyment in it. I thought, is there a different system that I actually could do this work in that might be even better? And so when I left that organization, I ended up working more directly with groups trying to make the world a better place. I started learning the tools of systems thinking, which give me a language to actually describe the sort of like missing loops of why things started to circle back in on themselves. And that I could actually create little mini flywheels that got more and more joy, seemed to have less and less suffering. And you could create these kind of flywheels both within my daily life. I could do that with habits, within individual relationships, within organizations. And this sort of pattern language was something that just fascinated me. And I still can't get enough of where can we bring this? What can we do with this kind of thing? I'm currently working with a group called We All Canada, the Wellbeing Economies Alliance. And I'm getting to play with these patterns, both with groups working at the individual mindset, but also within people trying to design new startups, creating businesses off of a new map with a new pattern, working with existing businesses, working with networks, changing politics. It's kind of this full stack of economics. And it's this work around repatterning. And I am so excited to get into dialogue with all of the others on here, because it sounds like there's something that they're seeing and stuff that they're creating, experiments that they're running. And there's something about this whole process that actually just fills me with joy and hope.
Working with you so much, experimenting and finding joy. So let's go to Eliza.
I love listening to everybody. So I grew up in the High Sierra Mountains in Tahoe as a skier. So with Lake Tahoe as my teacher. So I've always been on water, and my life is still all about water. So I didn't come to commons economics through economics. I came through water, recognizing that the currency is current. And this understanding began with a profound eye-to-eye encounter with a gray whale, and that is actually a true story. That she came and she put her eye in my hand and gave me a really essential recognition of something that I think I knew, but it really the experience was so profound, and it's basically one water, one life. And science affirms that there is only one water on Earth. It's the same water that's always been here. It's been cycling forever, and we are all part of that hydrologic cycle. And understanding that water is source, and that we are all water, and that human beings are composed of roughly 99% H2O molecules, and that covalent bond between hydrogen and oxygen is what makes all life. That we have liquid water on Earth, like this is a very real, tangible, actual fact. And yet we have this amazing species-wide amnesia about this in all sectors. The UN spoke to the UN. Water is barely mentioned in their output documents. A whale's life depends on healthy oceans. Healthy oceans depend on healthy watersheds. The water coming off the land, 85% of the pollution coming into the oceans is coming from the rivers. And yet there's a complete siloing of managing this. Healthy watersheds depend on healthy forests and healthy soils and healthy vegetation. And human beings and all of our well-being and all of our economics are nested within, not separate from, this living web. And this sort of study of this all my life, having never disconnected from nature, I've come to learn that nature, we're wanting to reconnect with nature, but nature is the nature of water. Without liquid water, we'd resemble Mars, right? There's no life on Mars. There's water, but there's no life. This brought me to the idea of reciprocity, and reciprocity not being a vague social construct, that it is the law of nature. It's all giving and receiving. And it is, as the primary pattern of nature, clouds give and watersheds receive. Rivers circulate and economic ecosystems return, always. Wetlands, forest soils nurture life, and life flourishes abundantly. Over the years of working with watersheds and communities and educators and scientists and indigenous leaders and regenerative practitioners, I begin to see that the challenge we're facing, climate disruption, biodiversity loss, poverty, conflict, social fragmentation, all may look different on the surface, but beneath them is a shared question. And it's basically what happens when we stop treating water as an extractable resource or commodity, and we begin to remember it as the living source and the commons that sustain us all. And listening to everybody on the planet, I'm hearing that a new economy needs reciprocity. It's not just to be circular. I mean, the idea of circularity in the economy is very important, that the value stays in the system, that it doesn't continually be extracted, and the people who've given their lives to provide the components of the economy are getting pennies on the dollar, and it's all being sucked into these vast sort of profit swamps. In that water is most valuable when it's in circulation. Money is current. Money is currency. It is most valuable when it's in circulation. And communities are the engine for that circularity, because they are the ones that suffer the greatest consequences and will manage and regulate the economy. Communities that are making the economic system run. And no economic system can be any more coherent than the relationships of the people within it. Right?
Yeah, that
So just
concept.
to think about that.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, the biggest question is, when will we start designing our systems that return value to the living commons that make all of our prosperity possible?
Perfect. Yeah, it's a good segue to our next question. And I just, it really stays with me, that concept of profit swamps. It really gives it the right energy of what it is if we're not flowing in that currency. So how and when are we making these systems that really work for us? I would like to hear from you brilliant panelists of how this collaboration is coming forth. How are we working together to get these systems made? And I think rather than doing a round, I think I'll just open it up for someone who feels inspired to, and set it into more of a dialogue space here. What's working in the collaboration? What's emerging in the collaboration? How are we going to get this done? Somebody pick it up.
Yeah, maybe that's a nice segue, because I think there's a reason for this timing. So I'm a child that has a mix of East and West. So I've grown up with knowing that two worlds can exist together. And I think what we're now doing, for example, with Planeteer and in collaboration with also Gaia Commons, is to say, okay, if you start with what is a world that works with everyone, basically, if you symbolically would say it is restoring trade routes with reciprocity, joy, but also celebration of life. And I think that is something we try to ground in the here and the now by actually seeing, okay, what is it that we can work on today, whether that is soil, whether that is the different challenges we're facing, but then also simultaneously look at the model we're working with. So what if we would allocate a certain percentage of value created beyond we can create value in different way, but also if we look at the monetary side of it, and we would allocate that to a collective fund, which would, for example, be governed by Gaia Commons, which is something we're looking into, which means by doing already what we're doing, we can allocate funds to where they're needed most. And that's, I think, something which is always missing around the table to say, okay, we can make impact, but how do we actually execute it today and make sure that the people who need it most benefit from it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually connecting it too, is that it's like doing what the Heritage Foundation and the others did a while ago. They made a fund that gave them wealth and power. And it's like, well, maybe we do a little bit of the same thing there.
Yeah, one other thing that's working around the world is there's a lot of grassroots efforts, whether it's purpose-driven organizations, local communities, regenerative farms, right? There's a lot of these amazing things happening, and they're growing in.
I have a question about that, and I wonder if somebody here has an answer. Kara brought in the idea of playing Monopoly in this capitalist board game, and I'm now picturing a different board over here that's the regenerative game or something, and we can build infrastructure here. But if I'm actually 1 foot in each game, and for every sort of like monopoly dollar that I get in one game, I'm actually spending 80% of it in the capitalist game just because I can't buy my food or my other things that I need, like my clothing, from this game. It's not selling me. It's like I could buy more coaching. That's great. But how does that work? I know it's all in the same like room, so to speak, but is there this capitalist extraction, and do we have to sort of work against that dynamic, or is there something there?
I will jump in and say that what if we actually created a marketplace for ourselves for really supporting what we believe in, and that we're providing ethical livelihood to the farmers that are growing our food so they don't have to play that game, and that we're creating, I like the 1/3, 1/3 model, that 1/3 is going to the producers of the product, 1/3 is going to the system that's the market that's managing it, and 1/3 is going to a legacy fund that's going to be restoring the watersheds and creating a mutual aid fund, providing school fees for the children. Like, we can do that. Right. And part of my what I've come to is recognizing that water doesn't ask if it's politically correct or convenient to circulate. It moves, it nourishes, it connects, it returns, it makes all life possible. And we all are participating in that same hydrologic cycle. So what if we actually came back to water as the original intelligence of life on Earth, and came co-creators with water as our design partner? Because water's been rejuvenating and revitalizing life. That's what water does forever, right? And will continue to do so long after we're gone. So what if we could actually design our systems to act like water and to circulate in those ways, and to support the watershed from the ridge to the reef, and be interconnected and be inclusive and nurturing of all life and everything? I mean, and that we actually are giving back to that system, because we as humans continue to extract, even if we don't think that we are. We are. If we're not giving back to Gaia, then we're part of the extraction. And so how can we give back more than we're actually taking? And there's so many ways we could do that.
Yeah, I like to add an answer to your question. I think it's very important to have like a really pragmatic approach to how we can tap out of the old system, which needs like a multi-layer approach. Like we want to tap out of everything. Like now we're using all this technology to like, a new system is mainly technology if you like look into the economics part. It's really important that we find ways to tap out of the technology. Like we're using Hubcast right now, which is kind of an example of something that's really more into the new system. Or we're using Zoom, which maybe a little bit in the middle. We're using all these social media elements that we have to find ways to step into the new. But yeah, in the end, all this technology we're building is a really important example, and where we have to look into how we can transition. I think I can mention a few things that I'm building here, which, for example, is like a whole scoring system, which is like it's redesigning value on like ecological parameters, social parameters, quality parameters, and you get like a really solid, fair pricing, true pricing system from which you can, like, the better the score of the product, the more it fits into the new paradigm. So this is like a really relevant tool, I think, for people to use to step more into this new system. And another thing that I'm working on is this phone. It's like an e-ink smartphone. I'm not sure if my screen is shifting now on this middle thing, but yeah, this phone is like it has everything that a modern smartphone has. It's a revenue model that like taps into the new system, And like it's basically also a ticket to the new economy, because the whole software on it can be customized towards like new paradigm ways of looking at society. So I think these kinds of tools, like these are two examples that I'm working on, are really important to have. Like this step into the old paradigm, looking at phones like it's the main technology that people use when it comes to hardware. So it's super important to have like those like transitional elements as well, besides like the super important elements of regeneration that are like at the basis of our new paradigm. These are like the bridging elements that we also really need.
Yeah, maybe I would just say that on this question, what becomes clear is that it's a step-by-step process, right? To answer your question around, like in the sense that there are already a lot of alternatives in terms of not spending it in the old economy, if we still want to call it, but spending the shares in the regenerative economy. However, these options are often very fragmented, and even if there are, for example, alternative currencies that are being designed, they are often also very fragmented, and it's very difficult to sort of create or find an interconnected system that works as well as the current financial system that we have. And so I believe that in order to really have the opportunity of an emergent collaboration between the aligned actors in the regenerative field, there needs to be very clear frameworks and also the technology that Oliver mentioned that allow us to really step into that collaboration, that makes it clear what is that we membrane, right? Like if we want to step from this I and I topic into a true we, it needs to be clear how that, what is that we? How is it interconnected? How is my contribution to the we being accredited or maybe also remunerated? How are we making sure that the product of that we is being made available to the collective and not fenced off? And so all of these questions need to be asked and then also asked and answered, and then also iterated one by one in the sense that we will have to make an MVP in a sense, or a minimum viable product. Here comes the entrepreneur within me that actually makes it work at a maybe smaller scale. It might not be perfect, but then you use that coordination infrastructure to make the next best version that allows more inclusion, more distribution of power, more products to be available within the ecosystem in the regenerative way, and then also increase the mechanisms that allow you as an individual, Narayan, to bring that back in, to have access to more and more products within the regenerative ecosystem over time.
Yeah, I think it's a full transition from, we see, I think it's a classic model that a lot of us use with the two loops, where the old system is fragmenting and the new system is coming together and becoming and growing and shifting the dynamics to become the new system. And the new system, all the products become regenerative, and hopefully there's some tipping point there where all the multinationals say like, okay, we can't do this anymore, it's not viable economically, socially, or possible. So then we can start to get there.
I'm picturing in this game almost like completing a supply chain, where if you can get all of the different components to be sort of like playing in regenerative principles, then you've like completed something. And I love, Silvanae, what you're talking about around, maybe part of my focus can be, how do we support people to create the option, to give people a choice in a world right now where we don't feel like there's that many choices, and it's really hard to imagine the alternative. Mm-hmm. And there might be some tipping point once, oh, I can actually meet 50% of my needs in this kind of new paradigm kind of space. And when I do it that way, my community seems to be growing, and my and the natural world around me seems to be healing in a different way. That's inspiring.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, not only that though, like when you use your local network, you actually end up getting more resource compared to if you try to use the regular market. We need to reach these efficiencies, which actually make it even more favorable for us to engage with the commons than to engage with the current capital markets. I think that's where this can really head in the ultimate direction.
That's beautiful. Well, it's time to bring Hunter back in as our keynote listener and see what she's picking up to reflect back to us from the wise generation to the next generation.
Well, thank you all. These have been inspiring, awesome presentations. A number of things came to mind. Silvanae, you spoke about fairness and equity, and these have to be baked in. There is a project that was created under the Club of Rome, run by a marvelous woman named Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, called Earth for All. They took the original limits to growth concept, which was a computer modeling exercise done in 1972. First, by the way, use in the English language of the word sustainability. The lead author was Donella Meadows. Many of you have talked about systems thinking. Dana's the one who wrote the book, Thinking in Systems, that has brought this concept into currency. Limits, the book basically said, if we continue as we are, somewhere between 2015 and 2030, the world crashes and burns. The wheels come off the industrial system. Hello, here we are. And so what Sandrine did was pull together one of the original authors, Jan Randers, and some of his colleagues and a bunch of the rest of us with a new computer model, an extrapolation of the one that Dana and crew used, and said, what would it take to not collapse, not crash and burn? And they came up with what they call 5 turnarounds. We've got to largely eliminate poverty. Whoa, how do you do that? There is some brilliant economic work by Randall Wray, Stephanie Kelton, on things called guaranteed jobs, where the government says, we will hire anybody who wants to work at a living wage. And there are lots of jobs that need to be done, cleaning up all of the mess, taking care of people, educating people that aren't now getting educated. The government pays people to do that. At that point, the corporations, if they want to compete for the best talent, have to match that living wage. This largely eliminates poverty. And there are a number of other ways of doing that. And the book goes into detail about how to do that. Second turnaround, inequality. And again, the book goes into all sorts of ways of how this can be done. International drawing rights for poorer countries. And if you want to dive more into that, I suggest the book Earth for All. And then education, particularly of women, energy, agriculture. I mentioned the latter two. But it's an interesting look at really pragmatically, what would it take to turn this around? Now, lots of controversy, conversation back and forth of, is Earth for All the be all and end all? Clearly not. And to my way of thinking, the agriculture chapter sucked. So I said, take my name off the book. Oliver, you mentioned consciousness and that self-sufficient efforts tend to crash. Yeah, our side's not very good at taking care of each other. If indeed the wheels are going to come off, and that is possible, various people, Gaia Harrington, Graham Turner out of Australia, have looked at the actual data from the time Limits was written until, in Gaia's case, 2020, we're squarely on track for the worst of the collapse scenarios. What if the economy crashes? Now, a lot of people say, yay, we'll figure it out. No, we won't. If we're not prepared ahead of time, it's going to be exceedingly ugly, and the poorest people will be hurt the worst. So a lot of communities are now deliberately meeting and talking about resilience hubs. There's a great group in Europe called Bioregional Weaving Lab, where people are coming together and talking about how do we create greater self-reliance, if not self-sufficiency. Investing in that thinking, in those ideas, will be very important. Daphne, you mentioned how do we replicate what Heritage did? Actually, what Heritage did was just get endowed. All of the organizations I mentioned, they were created right after 1971. They're all still here. Why? Because they are endowed. All of our organizations scratch and claw to try to get enough money to keep going. What if we consciously started saying, what are the organizations that we need to have endure, and endow them? This would be the role for real philanthropy. Philanthropy now says, oh, give me a proposal, and we only fund in this area. So you twist yourself into a pretzel to create a project that would fit their funding, and 2 years on, well, we're going to do something different. The philanthropic model of today to the nonprofit world really doesn't work. Interestingly, one of the more interesting things I've heard recently in the for-profit world is a thing called search funds. It turns out, there's one out of Canada, turns out there are a great number of small, privately held businesses, typically mom and pop shops, where there is no successor. And so what this fund is doing is identifying all these little companies that have an important role in their community and investing in them so that they can endure, make the transition. It turns out doing this gives you a much higher return on investment than traditional investing. So what are the mechanisms that we can put in place to ensure that money flows to the companies that are doing the good work? Bart, you mentioned a rating system. That would be a good idea. If all of us knew, oh, let's see, I'm going to buy a Zorch. Who's the best company in my community to do that? How do I evaluate them? Several of you talked about the human tendency to be extractive. There's some very interesting work out of Harvard, Dr. Paul Lawrence, and out of Fordham, Dr. Michael Pearson, who say humans have 4 drives. The drive to acquire, and once we have stuff, the drive to defend. The neoliberal economists have glommed onto that and said, well, we're all greedy bastards, but the market is perfect. Therefore, in a perfect market, you against me will aggregate to the greater good, except it doesn't. And Lawrence and Pearson say, in part, that's because humans have 4 drives. The 3rd drive is the drive to bond. We come together. We like other people. And the 4th drive is the drive to comprehend. We tell stories. We create meaning. And when you put all of these together, you get a very different picture of what does it mean to be human. It turns out, if you look back in archaeology, the neoliberal mantra that humans are basically greedy bastards, we're only in it for ourselves, is not true. In the south of Africa, they found a skull of an old, toothless man, lovingly buried. You don't get to be old and toothless if somebody's not taking care of you. And it turns out this burial site, we know this from the DNA. These were our ancestors. There were many tribes of pre-humans. They all went extinct, except for this one. That desire to bond, to care, is in you. These were our ancestors. So one of the things I think that we could usefully do is redefine what does it mean to be human. And Lawrence and Pearson say this is universal across all people. Yeah, we want the stuff that will sustain us. When we have the stuff, we try to take care of it. But that's not all of what it means to be human. This drive to care, to bond, is equally important. We mentioned circularity. This is one of John Fullerton's principles of regenerativeness. And Eliza, you mentioned water. I was just with Jeremy Rifkin, who has a new book out called Planet Aqua. Highly recommended. He says, we're not earth, ground, sand, soil. We're water.
Yeah, planet water.
Planet Aqua. And he said, water is rewilding. And it's not our choice. Water is going to go where it wants to go. With global warming, there is roughly 10 to 14% more moisture in the atmosphere. And that water is going somewhere. It is falling out. It's drying up. Rivers are flooding. Drought is happening. What happens with water is going to determine a great deal about our future. Again, the good news, you look at the science, you look at the best of the studies, we know what it is we need to do. We just need to get about it.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Thanks for those reflections and additions, Hunter. I think you solved one of the pieces of the puzzle there that I was looking for as well with the search funds of the businesses. And now I'd like to open it up with to plenary, to our people who are in the Zoom room with us, to ask questions and give comments. You're able to unmute yourself now. See some beautiful people here with us. Good. We have Michael Coles. Go ahead. You're able to unmute. You are unmuted, Michael. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
finally, it just did that. Thank you very much. My question, basically, and thanks for good additional vibration to the youth's perspectives and so forth. It's really refreshing to see more youth come into the space collaboration of what I'm witnessing. So this is also a very foundational one that I think is key to move forward in the different perspectives that are brought here today. Absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask is, at the very root of everything that's said today, I wanted to just ask, what is it what is it in your perspective is the root value of our humanity? And I say that because on everybody has a very specific perception and understanding of the system of which we are enslaved in, and how to move into a different realm of responsibility. So it's based on that of which my question from is, what is it that is really value at the root, and moving consciously to weave everything that's been said into that frame of mind, because we are human. It is our value. We are value. We are value to each other. We are value to the universe. We are value to the spiritual connection realm here, Mother Earth. So how can we utilize our
thanks. We've got
value system to move forward in weaving this? Thank you very much for. I know it's a bit of long-winded, but I just wanted to bring what is it, the word value? Thank you very much for all your.
Yeah, we're working with Sarah McCrum with the Hague Center, looking at doing systemic constellations on that concept of value and money. And so that energetic sense, as well as how are we valuing life and becoming that. So does one person who wants to comment on that the most, sort of put your hand up higher if you want to. I think, okay, Silvanae wins with her clowning.
Oh, now I feel bad for Elisa.
Okay, we'll let you both answer then.
I think that the question of values is really indeed a crucial one, and rethinking value. And I would say that one of the key values of what the infrastructure that we are supporting with Gaia Commons is that this decision of what is valuable and valuable to be funded with new or alternative currencies, but also with fiat, our existing predominant currencies, is no more as centralized as it currently is, which is right now basically what's being funded is getting decided by central banks and a bunch of rich peoples to break it down, and so we are creating the value that we're bringing is that we are supporting the creation of infrastructure that allows that decision to be distributed. Because also, as I think you kind of hinted on that, the question of what is valuable is answered very differently from different kinds of people. And so one important piece is that we give voice to different wisdoms, different ways of how we are seeing what is valuable for different communities, and also making the distinction between what can be answered locally and what needs to be aggregated a bit on a more global level. And so I think that's what rethinking value, distributing or decentralizing the decision of what is valuable, getting away from what to define value as an exchange value, as our neoliberal and neoclassical economists like to define value, to a more integral definition of value. That's the value that we bring, I would say.
Thank you for that. That's a good segue. I think the greatest value that we as humans have on Earth is to be good stewards. I think creation has created us to be good stewards, and we've claimed all the benefits of being stewards with none of the accountability or responsibility. And so again, that giving back, that idea of giving back. But I'm working on a paper called the 12 Realms of Living Water Value, and taking the idea of 8 forms of capital and saying that's not quite enough. And also recognizing that money itself is not a value. Money is a symbol of the value of our relationships and our agreements. Money itself is just an idea that we've created an illusion of value around. But really, it's our relationships that money is the symbol of. And so can we get beyond that? And if getting beyond that means that we have good relationships and good agreements, then money becomes less necessary. And we don't need to put the immense value on money when we're putting value on other things, such as the living systems that sustain us, because no tech is going to save us if our water system collapses. And it is calibrating, water's calibrating. And we can either be part of that calibration or we can ignore it and get spanked really hard. And that's just a super basic reality that we need to be facing, and to build resiliency, because we've already taken our systems to the point of extreme calibration. You can see that as cars pile up in Valencia with the floods and the droughts and all the chaos that we have. So we can either really serve that calibration and understand that that's what's happening, or we can pretend like it's not happening and then we'll suffer the consequences. And we have to keep our living systems. We can't let Earth go into cardiac arrest. You're on mute, Kara.
Dr. Marty Casey is adding in on the chat, so we need to get to a place where life is more valuable than currency. Great, let's have a Joy.
What nature does, by the way, is create conditions conducive to life. And people say, save the Earth. The Earth will be fine. It's humans who are in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is no water crisis. There's a human crisis.
Joy, I just invite you to take a breath and ask your question in a succinct way as you can, so we have more time to answer. Joy?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a couple of questions that we might want to ask ourselves. If we were looking at a 7,000-year-old habit of being addicted to punishment and pain and fear, and then we looked at what is the 300 or 150-year habit of endorsing and calcifying that fear pattern, what would we see that is different if we didn't use all the models and the presumptions that we have been using for systems design according to our calcified thinking in the first place? What if we said, okay, let's say I didn't know anything, and let's look at this as children, and I don't mean ignorant children, I mean it curiosity with the children's eye to how would we create a different game to get a different outcome, and what would that outcome be like? How can we create a board game and an interactive internet game and an interactive Monopoly game all at the same time? We have the capacity. And you have geniuses from every single one of our systems experts serve on the panel and be responsible as the custodians of the question. So you ask the question and you ask these people to answer the questions themselves, and then ask the public who isn't playing these games, who isn't working in your field, to give you feedback. We can do that using integrated intelligence and questions and queries. And I think that is a game that we could play that would knock your socks off of any Think and Grow Rich game, off of any board game. I went down to a GameStop and I was looking at what they have to help us change the world. And there is not hardly any games in the board game world or in the commodities world or in any kind of world which is not focused on money only. Remove money from the equation and say, okay, if it was a values-driven game and the results mattered to us humans and us humans 7 generations forward, how would we design that game? Let's start over.
Yeah, there's a freshness to that inquiry. Thank you. Yeah.
And maybe since you're mentioning 7 generations and, referring also to indigenous traditions, if you look at, okay, what could underlie actually entrepreneurship, I think when we used to work with the Anishinaabe, the values that come about are honesty, courage, love, wisdom, respect, truth, and humility as the 7 teachings. That is something we are not taught in business school. So I think a lot of things that we see as systems models are coming basically after a long time, that there have been principles that we almost even in the West have been forgotten.
And I know Anna Luce's Earthwise game is a really beautiful model where it's teaching us how to be win-win thinking, to bring the tree of life, to defeat the dark shadows that would separate us, and to use currencies and quests to get us there. So she's one of the pioneers in this field that we respect deeply. That's the Elwyn game. Maybe someone can find the link for that. ELWO, you'll find it. Yeah. Good. Okay, well, we're getting down to our last 5 minutes, so it's time to wrap up. So not everyone can share. Sorry about that, Jack and Kat, but we'll see how it goes after, if there's a little space or not. Great. Yes. So I just want to just give a great big.
Okay. So can you hear me? Okay.
Oh no, sorry, Jack. We gotta close up now. Yeah, so I just want to say a great big thank you to you, Hunter. You're a hero of mine. I grew up with anytime anything was something excellent was coming out teaching me about sustainability, it was from the Rocky Mountain Institute, the Factor 4 and all that. It was so good. And these group of people, Elisa, I'm realizing I've been calling you the youth and the young generation, so I hope you're thrilled about that. And I just have such deep respect and awe and joy to be in this circle, co-creating with you guys. And we're the amount of dedication and giving and sacrifice as well. And I think, and we're starting to spin that wheel so that it's not a sacrifice, so that it's a joy, so that it builds up, so that we're creating this regenerative and cooperative game, and we're having a great time as we do it. So I just want to feel, I'm just going to ring the bell for us as we're feeling that we're living this regenerative world, that we're part of it, that we've already created it in some dimension, in some future, and in some presence, in some places on the earth. We're living it, we're being it, we are it, it's living us. So let's just take a moment together. And just feel the spirit of World Unity Week hold us in this truth. Thank you so much, and I'd love to hear what's coming up next on the lineup from World Unity Week. I can pull it up, but maybe someone else just has it on the tip of their tongue.